What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Chat It Up podcast. As always, I'm your host, Shooter, bringing you interviews, news, and reviews about all things Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I've got another really great episode for you guys this week, but before we get into all that, I just wanted to take a minute and talk about the elephant in the room, for lack of a better term, and obviously that's this global pandemic that we're all dealing with the coronavirus. The majority of you listening to this are probably listening from your home and are sheltered up and trying to do what you can to avoid getting sick. And it's crazy times. I mean, this episode was recorded about 3 weeks before all of this happened, and it's definitely eye-opening and scary to see how quickly our entire world can change. But the one silver lining for me anyways has been seeing just how much support we've been giving each other across our communities, especially for small businesses, because right now these small businesses need us more than ever. So if you're listening to this, I can't encourage you enough to continue to help out your neighbors and your friends and family that are small business owners. They are the backbone of our communities, and like I said, they need us just as much as we need them, so please continue to do that. I wish I had something a little more poignant and uplifting to say, but I'm definitely far from being a philosopher or anything like that. I guess the one thing just that I will say is I really hope that this podcast can be a source of comfort for you and a sense of normalcy during these trying times, because like I said, a lot of you are listening from your homes and you've probably been cooped up for quite some time, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there, which is scary. So I hope all of you listening in are safe and sound and doing well. So just continue to take care of your loved ones and your family and friends, and like I said, I just hope that this podcast can be a sense of comfort for you, and I'm going to continue to work on ways to keep this podcast going and get some interviews out there on a regular basis. So, all right, let's jump into things here. So we'll start with, as always, This Day in Yooper History, which is brought to you by the good folks at pasty.com. That's pasty.com, and the Pasty Central Facebook page. This is Thursday, March 26th, This Day in Yooper History.
Pasty Central Day in History, March 26th. On this day in 1874, Robert Frost was born. Could he have had in mind a midwinter vision of northern Michigan when he penned the words, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep." Robert Frost, born 134 years ago today, and on this anniversary of one great American poet's birth, another one passed away. Walt Whitman died on this day in 1892. 1892 being the year the old depot was built in Ironwood, Michigan, which today houses the Ironwood Historical Society and Museum and the Ironwood Area Chamber of Commerce. Pasty Central Day in History, March 26th.
Another thank you to the folks at pasty.com and the Pasty Central Facebook page for making that segment possible. It's time for this week's interview, and it is one that I can officially check off of my bucket list of people that I wanted to have on the podcast. And this interview is with Mr. Bob Jacquart. Bob is the CEO of Jacquart Fabric Products over in Ironwood, Michigan. They've been in business for over 60 years, and they also own the brand that we all know and love, Stormy Kromer. I've had a chance to talk to Bob a few different times over the years, and every time I've had a chance to meet with him, he's always super dynamic and very friendly and outgoing. So when I was making my initial list for this podcast, I knew that at some point I had to get him on here. As some of you know, I had his daughter Gina on the podcast last year, and when I headed over to Ironwood to make that interview happen, I told her that we had to try somehow, some way make time for me to sit down with Bob, and thankfully, just recently, the stars aligned, and I was able to sit down with him for over an hour to talk about his journey to where he is today from where he started, and it is absolutely incredible. So I'm going to, as always, get out of my own way here and let the interview do the talking for itself. So sit back, relax, and without further ado, let's chat it up. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here at the legendary Jacquart Fabric Products in Stormy Kromer factory. I'm sitting here with Mr. Bob Jacquart. Bob, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Good morning, Scott.
Yeah, this is kind of a bucket list interview. When I first sat down almost 2 years ago and started making my list of people I wanted to sit down and talk to, you were near the top of that list. So this
really
is an
nice.
honor for me. We'll just jump right into things here. I know you're a born and raised Ironwood resident. You grew up here in the UP. What was small town life like for you growing up here? Because obviously your version of growing up in the UP is very different than mine, different from somebody from the Keweenaw or from Marquette. What was that like for you?
Well, when you told me you were going to ask this question, I immediately thought of the one video that I see from old black and white Upper Peninsula, and that's the Smiling Doug Nord video from Iron Mountain ski jumps and everything. And when I think of that, I think of it being very similar, and I thought, I'm not going to have anything different. Different when I go to Calumet, it looks the same. But I think Ironwood has a slight difference in the fact that Ironwood really was divided by a railroad track.
Okay.
And we lived on my dad worked for the city. He was a fireman.
Oh, okay.
And we lived on the other side. I was born and raised in a mine house, and my house to the right was the opposite of our house, and next one up was the same as ours. And there was a driveway between us and stuff like that. And it didn't feel different when I was really young, because it was just go to school, and my school was 3 blocks away, so I walked to school all the time. Never took a bus, never took hot lunch. I was close enough.
Sure.
Went to the Catholic school.
Okay.
But as I got older, I realized that that separation was really kind of cool. It wasn't detrimental. It wasn't like I felt looked down upon or anything like that. But there was a group of people on the north side of Ironwood that really lived a slightly different life than they did. And the parents were different. You saw them in church, and you could say, those. And it was just kind of cool understanding that, feeling that separation, everything like that. But like I said, it was no harm done. We just kind of lived in our own world. And what was unique about where we lived is in my backyard was a row of mine boss houses.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like there's 10 of them on that block. The houses, I live in a mine house, and in my backyard there's a house with a servant's stairway.
Wow.
So, in fact, my uncle actually was a businessman and could have lived on the other side of town, but he lived in one of those mine houses with a servant stairway in it.
Okay.
And so there's 2 stairways, one for the regular people and one for the servants, and sleeping quarters for the servants and all that stuff. So that would be something as a young child that really I can look back on now and come to realize how interesting that was for me.
Yeah, certainly unique. Now, you mentioned a little bit that your father was a fireman. I know that he started this business in the late 50s. Was he still working as a fireman when he started this business?
Yeah, so Dad, so growing up, a unique thing about being the son of a firefighter is that they worked 24-hour shifts.
Yes.
And they had a bed in the fire hall. Mm-hmm. So, and I can remember the beds lined up, and there was a word that said Bob above my dad's bed, and so they slept in this big hall. There was 20 or so beds there, but there was only 4 or 5 men on a shift, depending on if somebody was away or something like that. But if he slept all night, he came back. He left at 7 in the morning on, let's say, Monday. And if there was no fire, he just went to bed like he did at home.
Yep.
And he woke up at 6:30 and came home at 7 o'clock the next day. Mm-hmm. Well, then he didn't go to work until Wednesday. And so all the firemen that we knew, they worked for furnace installation companies, the moving company, because these guys knew the firemen there was a healthy, working age person available who could, I'm assuming it was cash money, back in those days. Anyway, My dad started sewing in the basement of our home.
Okay.
Bought a old Singer 111W. I remember it very well. So it was olive drab colored, came from the Army surplus and everything like that. And he just started. The word for him was putzing, sewing,
Yes.
making things out of and repairing products and everything like that. And then I'll just give you a little bit of his history. Then in 1965, about a block and a half away from our home was my grandfather's empty, not used little neighborhood grocery store.
Oh, okay.
Jacquart's Finer Groceries.
Interesting.
And so I can't remember 65. That's just about when they both died. They died really close together. But the building became available. The brothers and sisters says we don't know what to do with it. My dad somehow took a chance and went opened that place up at that time it was called Jacquart Manufacturing, and he hired Dorothy. And so Dorothy was there 9 to 5, while my dad would come in and do the books and things like that on his days off at the fire hall.
Sure. Okay. So when it first started as Jacquart Manufacturing, what type of things was he making? I mean, I know bank bags was really what started it, right?
Yeah, so it was really bank bags, and lots of stories. Like my sister and I would get in the back seat of the car, and on some of his days off, he actually drove to the Iron Mountain National Bank or whatever it was.
First National Bank?
Yeah, I don't know how old what the name was back in the early 60s, but
right.
And he'd come up with a smile on his face and that sort of thing. And a real interesting story, I think, because it just kind of represents who my dad was.
Sure.
And I'm trying to think if it's something I'm going to say it, and you can block it out if you want. But I guess we might have to edit this. But so my dad was a very, very proud B-17 top gunner on a B-17s. He flew missions from England to Germany. Very proud of it. Had to fly 35 missions, and he got to come home.
Sure.
He came back with an Army Air Corps ring.
Okay.
And it was like a class ring or something like that. And it had the Army Air Corps' insignia on it. That fell off over the years. And my dad actually also finished the Catholic seminary.
Oh, okay.
And so he did everything to becoming a priest except becoming a priest.
Sure.
And those in the UP that remember Father Capo from Marquette, he's quite a famous guy and very interesting guy. My dad was his classmate, so.
Wow.
Father Capo, when he saw him, we would always ask, how's your dad doing? Because they were classmates in the seminary. So my dad, when that insignia fell off, my dad put a crucifix on that ring.
Okay.
So the sides of the ring were Army Air Corps, and the top was a crucifix. And
very interesting.
Yeah, and I can remember my dad coming out of a bank somewhere in the UP. He's got his hands on the steering wheel of the Studebaker, and I'm sitting in the back, and he looks at my mom and said, I think I didn't get an order because of this ring. And I think the banker was of a different religion.
Wow.
Different faith.
Yeah.
And I could see my dad questioning whether he should take that ring off when he's trying to make a sale, giving up his pride of his religion.
That's a very interesting story.
Yeah, and so I remember that story like it happened yesterday. And on my 50th birthday, my mom and dad had this little plastic ring box, and handed me this thing and said, "This is your dad's ring.
Wow.
If you're not interested in it, we'll give it to our oldest grandson."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Are you kidding me? I mean, this ring, and it fits me, and my hands look very much the same as my father's. So when I put it on, it's like really eerie. I wear that because I'm not a jewelry person, but I wear that when I give speeches, just kind of to remember my dad. But it's pretty cool to have that. But
that's a great story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So
and it's actually kind of a perfect segue into what I really wanted to ask you next is, you're telling me these stories of things that you remember from your childhood growing up and being around the business. From being around the business, just kind of growing up, was it just kind of a natural progression then that you would kind of come into the family business, or was there like a certain point where you just made that decision?
Great question. And I'll tell you what, I would tell you 100%. Absolutely never did I think I was going to be here.
Really?
Never did I want to. Did I care about it? So what happened to me was both sides of our family both grandpas were grocers.
Okay.
And all the uncles were constant workers. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were Saturday projects with the uncles everywhere around here. One owned a fruit stand, one owned a gift store, and one had a Ben Franklin and Hurley, and there was always something to do with the uncles. I'm not that proud of this, but the fact was, it was more interesting to me to work with an uncle than it was to work with my father.
Okay.
I mean, I did a little bit of work there, but not much.
Okay.
But I spent a lot of times with my uncles.
All right.
And I don't think my dad ever had money at Jacquart Manufacturing to pay me anything. So there was, and in high school you want to earn a living. So I worked at the Ben Franklin and the fruit stand. But what happened was I was learning how to be an entrepreneur from the uncles actually, and then seeing my dad. So what got me to Jacquart Manufacturing was a timeout from college.
Okay.
And I had everything going for me, and I just couldn't see what I was studying. Sure. I couldn't see the end game, and nobody had showed me the end game, so I didn't know what I was working for. And so I took a timeout. I didn't have the heart to tell my father in person, so I called him at the fire hall and said, "Dad, I'm not going back to college." And he said, "That's really not so bad, because there's something right now. If you want to take a time out, I'll respect you." And they both respected me really nicely about it, my parents. But there's something really heavy at the office or the factory or whatever, the shop, that needed help. And it went from Dorothy to Evelyn. Evelyn's working there now. She's the only worker there now.
Yeah.
And Evelyn can't handle it. Go up there and help her. So I went up to Jacquart Manufacturing and taught myself to sew with Evelyn's help, and I probably instantly fell in love with it. And what was really had happened to me was I was a good student, and so back in those days there wasn't enough time to take all the good student classes and the shop classes. And because I went to the Catholic school, shop classes weren't that readily available anyway.
Sure.
So I had never really done anything like make something, like make a birdhouse or whatever, that kind of stuff that you do in shop class, right?
Yep.
Well, if you really think about it, cutting and sewing and scissors and a pencil and a ruler and a sewing machine is the ultimate craft to make, especially when you got lots of it. And I'm not making dresses at the time. I'm making boat covers and tarps and so almost from the day I started, my dad gave me the keys to run the business. And the interesting part of it is how your life works and everything like that. In June of 1971, my father told my mother he was closing at the end of the year.
Wow.
I found this out 5 years later. Okay. June of 1971, we're closing on December 31st.
Yeah.
September of 1971, I tell him I'm leaving college and I need a job. And then what happened was, and so a unique part about this was, my dad was repairing tarps for an extremely successful lumber veneer broker out of Mellon, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And Jim was 6'8" in his heyday, and he was shrinking down because he was white-haired, so however old that is, 65 to 75, I guess. And the big old black Lincoln, President Kennedy was assassinated in that big black thing. And I can remember getting out of it. And he came in very shortly after I started and said, "Aren't you supposed to be in college?" Like, he said it with the love of an uncle.
Sure.
It was not condescending. It was... And for some reason, he picked up on my energy, my business energy.
Okay.
And very early on, I can remember him sharing with me, Catholic school boy, it was easy to figure out that you could trust me, and I was had good values and everything like that. But I remember seeing an 8-digit personal financial statement of his.
Wow. Of
seeing his businesses and him telling me. And so that was just like, wow, because I didn't know anything about this kind of the world because they were on the other side of the tracks growing up in Ironwood. Now this guy's sharing it with me.
Wow.
And then you talked about another unique part about the geography or whatever. What is it like in Ironwood? Well, one of the interesting things about living in Ironwood is that 40 miles south of here, because I'm right at the point of the Upper Peninsula, right? So south is Wisconsin, 40 miles south of Wisconsin, is basically the Traverse City of Wisconsin.
Sure.
Minocqua, Manitowish Waters,
Yep.
Eagle River,
Yep.
Boulder Junction, all those little cities is where the wealth of Madison, Milwaukee, northern Chicago come. A lot of them, a big chunk of them.
Sure.
Okay. So now picture this. I learned how to make boat covers. I'm 21, 2, 3, something like that, and I'm good at it. Okay. So I'm good enough at it that people want me to make them a cover because it'll fit nice and look nice on their real nice boat. Now imagine getting a call from the CEO of Allstate Insurance and having him want you to make a boat cover for his 1938 Chris Craft antique boat. Okay. And trying to and having a vision of trying to figure this out, because I don't know what the other side of the tracks lives like, right? I'm still stuck over here in my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to chase him down between his home in San Francisco, his home in Chicago, and his home in Manitowish Waters.
Yeah.
So eventually I get there to his home, and he'll tell you this to this day. In fact, I'll see him. I see him once a month in the summertime and have breakfast with him. Okay. We're still friends, and this is maybe 1973 or 1974, so it goes way back.
Yeah.
He'll tell you that my jaw hit the floor when I walked in and saw the $2 million third home.
I bet, yeah. Mine would hit the floor too.
It's like, how do you do this? I mean, how on earth do you do this? And,
right.
And so now I'm somewhat my knowledge is I'm somewhat segregated in Ironwood. I don't know what the other side of the tracks lives like. I've never been in their homes or anything like that.
Right.
There's a little bit of aloofness to them, and you just knew that. I just knew that, that there were some families here that knew that I had a different place than they did.
Sure.
And the next thing you know, I'm sitting at the coffee table with Al McNichol, and he's treating me like an equal, like a fellow businessman.
Sure.
And then Al tells his friend, and his friend tells his friend, and his friend, and just like that, I've got a bunch of mentors that are just helping me grow like crazy, giving me aspirations and thoughts and excitement on how to grow my business. So I just really think that the geography, I mean, if I would have plunked somewhere more north and not have access to these people, and everybody in the UP that has the opportunity to see tourists, like one of my friends is from Curtis, and they owned a bait shop in Curtis when they were little, and and they have those friends too. But those people are huge for us if you can get access to them.
Absolutely, that's a very unique perspective that I wasn't expecting to hear from you. So I appreciate that, because I would never think that your pipeline, for lack of a better word, of mentorship and kind of guidance would come from that.
Yeah.
That's certainly unique.
Yeah, and there's another part of it is that I didn't finish college. Mm-hmm. I didn't leave Ironwood, basically. I've lived in 3 homes in Ironwood and 1 dorm in college. And so I've only moved, and so there's part of you that thinks you're a small town schmuck that hasn't done anything, right? And you haven't gone off and adventured in the world and everything like that. And,
sure.
And so you struggle to go to class reunions because people come back and they have all these exciting adventures and all that fun stuff. So about 6 years ago, I'm in Manitowish Waters there's a place called Little Bohemia that's the famous Dillinger shootout place.
Yes.
And a lot of those former boat cover customers hang out there. And I was watching a Packer game with 4 or 5 of them, and with just the guys. The ladies were at another table. We were watching a Packer game at a high top table in the bar at Little Bohemia. And one of them spent $1,500 in fuel for a round trip on his CJ3 from Madison to, a $7 million custom-made Cessna CJ3. One of them is a McGraw from the McGraw Publishing family that publishes all the school books. And I'm sitting with these guys, right? And they have, decimal points in different places on their personal financial statement than I do. And one of them, a commercial comes on. It's the second game. Packers are playing the second game. It's about 5:20.
Yeah.
Commercial comes on. Guy looks at his watch, looks at me and says, "And you get to stay here." And that was so profound.
Absolutely.
For me, I mean, it's like with all the envy in the world,
yeah,
this guy that had all the money in the world would have given anything to be able to stay here.
That's extremely powerful.
And I kind of smiled and said, yeah, I get to stay here.
That's awesome. That's
so
very awesome.
I hope that's something that those of the Yoopers that are successful, no matter what it is, successful workers that have a great family and everything, we get to stay here.
Absolutely. That's a great point. When your father basically kind of handed you the keys, as you said, was he then at that point really not involved with the business, or was he still kind of working with you at that point at all?
So in the 70s, my dad did all the bookwork. And so, there's a lot of people that say that most of the growth was me. Yes, it was, but he had given me something. He had given me a credit rating with the big with the big vendors.
Okay.
Like there was a company called George B. Carpenter that was out of Chicago, and they sold canvas and zippers and snaps and buckles and things like that.
Sure.
We had a credit rating with them, so we already had a relationship. I didn't have to do any of that.
Gotcha.
And my dad was, because of his, priestly background, everything was, we've always had a reputation of paying our bills and on time. So no matter how small you are, as long as you pay your bills, we don't care. We're going to jump through hoops for the people that pay their bills. So he had this pipeline. He took care of all of that, did the paychecks and stuff like that. And he would come in and just do that. And once in a while, but he really wasn't involved that much in the making of things and the growing of things. He kind of just, like I said, he just gave me the keys and said,
okay.
And then interesting part of the story was he was a civil servant. He worked for the civil service. The fire hall was. A lot of firemen still do.
Okay.
And it's a common thing that they will get a pension from the fire hall, but not Social Security.
Oh, okay.
So the business was an attempt for my dad to get enough money into a Social Security account that he could get some sort of a check from Social Security.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's part of the strategy for my dad, which was brilliant because and so when I took over in 71, sometime in like 72 or 73, we decided that we can make a profit here because he hadn't. He was going to close. That we figured out some things. And there's another story. Our first big customer was a customer in Wisconsin to make tarps, truck tarps, semi-truck tarps from scratch. Instead of repairing them, somebody came to me and said, we're starting a business in Mercer, Wisconsin, which is only 25 miles south of here.
Yeah.
And we're going to make modular homes, and we're going to need tarps. Have you ever made new tarps? And I said, no, but I'll learn. I promise. I can find out. I can ask questions. I can ask the sewing guys. I can ask it. And he said to me, and this is how the small town, and people will get this, how much athletics are a part of the UP, basketball and football. And I was an athlete. He said to me, if you put as much energy into making my tarps as you did on the basketball court when you played against Mercer, you can have this contract.
Wow. And
I still see that guy, and in fact, my wife and I just love him because he that account almost doubled our business in the first year. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we started showing a profit, and to finish the story on my dad is we decided that whatever profits would go into the business would stay in his name for 10 years or 40 quarters.
Okay.
And then he could get a dribbling of Social Security. So
gotcha.
So then 10 years later, in 83, I actually became the owner. But we kept it in my dad's name just so that he could draw something from Social Security.
Okay. And I appreciate you framing that for me because one of the next questions I was going to ask you about 1983 was by that point you were up to 6 employees. I mean, so you're going from, in a 13-year span, for lack of a better word, you're going from you and Evelyn to now all of a sudden you've got 6 employees working for you. So it's nice to kind of frame that gradual evolution of this business. By that point into the 80s, you were making, what type of other stuff were you making?
So what ended up happening to me, Scott, was that, first of all, there are times when it's embarrassing to think it took me 10 years to add 6 employees when you see these startups that get to 400 in 4 years, but it's just the way it is. And also another part of that is that I was a distance runner. I'm a long distance cyclist.
Yeah.
In fact, this morning we're planning a trip from here to ride from here to Green Bay on our bicycles.
Oh, okay, cool.
And any of that kind of training requires long time,
Yes.
and a little bit of progression every day.
Yes.
You know, when you want to train for a marathon, you run 2 miles, and then the next day you run 2.5 miles, and
Yep.
let your body catch up, and then you run 4 miles, and that's kind of what this business has been, is this slow
Certainly.
progression of slow and steady. So sometimes it's embarrassing to say it took me that long, but that's my life. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
So what happened was, I'm doing boat covers down south. We're making truck tarps here.
Yeah.
We're not making many bags. We're making little athletic duffel bags for the local community that are selling, and we've got a lady doing that. We're putting zippers in jackets.
Okay.
And if your jacket broke, we'll put a new zipper in it.
Yeah,
if
yeah,
your
yeah.
jacket zipper broke. But on Saturdays and Saturday nights, my wife and I would, in the summertime, my wife and I would go up to Bayfield, Wisconsin, which has a lot of boats in it. Bayfield and Washburn and Madeline Island have lots of boats in
Sure.
it. And I became their boat cover maker. And if it was a good enough job, we would stop at the steak pit and have a nice dinner. And if it wasn't, we'd come straight home, just pay for the gas. So I was working on a 3-masted, 38-foot boat belonging to a wonderful man named Rick Schutz, and he said, "Would you ever think about doing production work?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, we've done a little bit of it, but nothing really big." And he says, "I'd like to start this physical therapy supply catalog, and I need lumbar rolls, the rolls that are 5 inches in diameter, and you put in your back,
Yep.
and you put in your back, and you would do the same thing around your neck, cervical collars." And so we started producing those things, and I got excited about someday owning a factory with 30 or 20, 40 people and
Sure.
having an impact on the community. I couldn't see it then, but it's like, boy, this could be cool if it would work.
Yeah.
But the perfect way to explain the 80s was, and the reason for our success, I believe, is that it's 1983, I think, when Rick asked that question.
Yeah.
It's the same time China's taken all the work away from the sewing factories.
Okay.
Exactly the same time.
Sure.
I'm living in the UP, so I don't have a clue, right? So
Right.
that's okay, fine.
Right.
I don't know what, I'm trying to get mass production work, but Oshkosh B'gosh is going to leave soon, and
Yep.
Jansport from Wisconsin is going to
Yep.
leave. Jockey was made in Racine for a long, long time, and
Yeah.
they left, and the work was just blowing out of here.
Right.
Okay, but what we were able to do is, because the owner was a craftsman and walks into a room and looks at how the chair, I look at a chair across there and how they put that backrest on, and how they, I'm constantly thinking that way. I look at your clothes and say, how did they make that seam in your shoulder, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I see that all the time, and it's fascinating to me. So we started making all the odd stuff.
Okay.
All the stuff, the delivery models that China can't do.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the things that China can't do or won't do? Or basically, it's small runs, it's unique fabric, it's quick delivery time. It's that kind of stuff. If you're Hanes and you want to buy T-shirts from China, they call it the pipeline, right? The supply chain is full of, there's a ship of fabric going over to China, there's a ship of fabric coming back with finished undershirts on it, and it's this big whole thing. Well, it takes forever. Right now, if you order from China, it's 90 to 120 days before you get the product.
Wow.
So who needs stuff quicker? Who's too small to go to China? So we started making all this odd stuff. We went and we picked up a medium volume making boat covers for a big marina in Duluth, like making 400 covers, but they weren't custom covers. We would go pattern it at the beginning of the year, and then we'd make of that particular 16-foot Sylvan runabout, we'd make maybe 20 on demand. You'd come and buy a boat, look at a boat on Monday, you'd pick out a 40-horse Evinrude to put on it, and you'd pick a cover. Well, while they're putting the 40-horse Evinrude on it, we're building the cover for you.
Interesting.
And we would have the cover there by the time the boat's ready to pick up. So that was short delivery. We were making gun cases for a company called Kolpin, Kolpin. We made 800 gun cases a day until the volume got even bigger, and then
I have a few gun cases from them.
Okay, yeah. So we did that in Fox Lake, Wisconsin, is where from, and Ron Kolpin became a friend. And you learn as you're going, and you keep finding these jobs. We found Wigwam Sock Company. A lot of people buy Wigwam socks.
Yep.
I think Jacquart Fabric Products is the only company to have private label, put a Wigwam label in a Wigwam product that wasn't done by the Wigwam Company.
Interesting.
There was a time when they branched off and made hats out of polar fleece, and so
Yeah.
they wove socks. Socks is a weaving process, not a sewing process. So we were cutting and sewing. I'm just thinking about how many dear friends I remember from all those days, But we made that, and then we got affiliated with a small pet supply catalog called Doctors Foster and Smith.
Yeah, I had that down here.
That was in 1988.
Yeah.
And so, interesting. And another part about canvas, I'll go back just to kind of fill in. When we were first married, Denise and I were first married, I worked in that first 10 years for my dad, Monday through Friday.
Sure.
Making canvas and boat covers and everything like that. When we got married in 1974, I upholstered the first chair for myself because we couldn't afford furniture.
Okay.
So I took a chair apart and figured out how to do it.
Yeah.
And I got kind of good at that too.
Okay.
So I was Bob the upholsterer as well. And so on the weekends, Friday and Saturday, I gave my dad $20 to rent his building, and I upholstered all weekend long.
So you had a side hustle.
So I had a side hustle, yeah. And
Okay.
that's when I bought a refrigerator and a barbecue grill and those kinds of things. So, but I'm this grunty kid from my side of the tracks, and now the next thing I know, I'm down in Manitowish Waters at the McNichol's home, and
Right.
now I'm not dealing with Mr. McNichol, I'm dealing with Mrs. McNichol.
Sure.
So now I've got to learn how to talk colors, because sometimes they're really helpless and they say, to me, what color would accent this? And I'm thinking, I don't have a clue. So I got not good at that. I learned how to be sufficient at that.
Okay.
But I understood it.
Sure.
Okay, I understood colors and matching and things like that. And I'm proud to say that I have a chair that was in Better Homes and Gardens. I upholstered a chair in a living room of somebody that owns a cranberry bog and some real wealthy people. And but I got good enough at understanding coordinating a living room. Okay. Or a den or something like that. I knew what it took. And you learn from that just with the exposure. Now you're looking at, Better Homes and Gardens magazines and seeing how they coordinate and what. It was back in the days when soft blue and old rose or mauve was really popular and those kinds of things. So take that in mind that I'm that. Now you get Marty Smith, who's starting this catalog.
Yeah.
He's got this mail order catalog. It's very, very, very small, very tiny. And he's a veterinarian that wants to sell pharmaceutical supplies to women.
Okay.
And at that time, it was a woman making $70,000 or more, living alone in an apartment in a big city.
Sure.
And he wanted to sell them flea and tick powder and the things that had margins in them.
Okay.
But he knew that looking like a pharmaceutical supply catalog wouldn't be good, so he thought that the way to attract that woman was with dog beds.
Okay.
And he was a practicing veterinarian that was seeing the dog back in the 80s come from the backyard into the home.
Sure.
And those of us that own pets becoming pet parents was the term.
Yes.
Daddy loves you, sweetie.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, everybody gets that.
Yep.
And he could see this, but it wasn't quite there yet. So dogs were coming in the house. So the dog beds weren't matching the interior of people's homes.
Oh, okay.
So now he had this guy that could learn how to make anything in production.
Sure.
And had a knowledge of coordinating in people's homes, and had a knowledge of what's the most dominant color in a guy's den. It's navy blue and hunter green and khaki. And so we're making dog beds like that to go in the man's den for his golden to sit by him when he's at his den. I knew those colors from being an upholsterer. Anyway, we grew with Marty Smith until he sold to Petco in 2013, and now the business is not there anymore. But that was a huge run for us.
Sure.
And we got really good at that, and that was a huge run for us. So that's kind of who we were. We were, I'll take anything, Bob's tails wagging to learn anything. And then just another thought about it is, if you've got the energy to want to be the craftsman, to make anything that comes by, people come by and say, can you make this? If it's the model's correct, you can glance at it and say, I can figure out how to make that.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of knowledge that comes from the guy that sells you sewing machines.
Okay.
Because they sell industrial sewing machines.
Sure.
To everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you want to make a sleeping bag, they'll say, so-and-so in South Dakota makes them like this with this machine. So-and-so in Mississippi makes them like this with that machine.
All right.
So-and-so in Indiana makes them like this, and this is the way I think he's having the most success. And so you got this intel from these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
That's so along the way. I just keep thinking. I mean, you're essentially kind of adding these layers along the way to yourself and to the business. You know, it's kind of like an onion if you peel back the layers. Obviously, not everything can be sunshine and rainbows, but I guess my question to you is, as you're taking on these different partnerships and doing these different runs and trying these different things, there's obviously a certain level of risk in doing that. I mean, were there ever any points along the way where you weren't real sure on taking that risk, or I guess what got you to that point where you're like, okay, I'm gonna take this risk and we're gonna head down this avenue, or did it maybe not feel like that at the time, like it was a big risk?
Oh, that's interesting that you say that story. So, as the business grew in Grandpa's grocery store, you're obviously not in Grandpa's grocery store today, right?
Right. No, we're not in Grandpa's grocery store.
I bought a grocery store across the street, down 4 buildings, an old one, and was cutting in that building.
Okay.
And then I bought the laundromat next to that grocery store.
Okay.
And I was building cat furniture for Foster and Smith in that building. Okay. Then I got the contract for Copen, and I rented another building about 4 blocks away. Okay. And then the dog bed shipment got so big we couldn't inventory them all. We'd make sewing them in Grandpa's grocery store, cutting them across the street, the fabric's coming across the street in carts, okay? And then we're filling them and shipping them in an IGA store about a half a mile away, okay? And I'm sitting at my sewing machine. I'm still sewing now for a living because I'm still part of making money for the company.
Right.
And I've got a toolkit, a canvas toolkit with sewing machine repair tools, and I'm on call for one of those other 4 buildings and my building to fix the machine if it breaks in the middle of production day.
Yeah.
And I was coming back from picking up my, stopping what I was sewing, grabbing the sewing bag, going to another building. I called Denise up and I said, this is killing me. I can't do this much longer. This 5 building stint is really a struggle.
Sure.
I said, I'm either going to go back and be Bob the boat cover maker and the upholsterer and make a pretty good living.
Sure.
Or I'm going to take a giant leap and get in the industrial park in Ironwood. And that was kind of momentous. And if there's anybody that in the UP that struggles with economic development, at the time Ironwood had a fabulous economic development guy who was kind of a friend. His kids were the same age as my kids in school, so I knew him. So I went to talk to Jerry, and he helped me walk through the logic of building where you're sitting right now. Well, I built 1/5 of where you're sitting right now. But keep in mind, in relative size, my biggest loan up until then was $8,000.
Wow.
Okay, the biggest loan I had ever taken was $8,000, and this to move out here was $490,000.
Wow.
So relatively, this was just monstrous for me.
Yeah.
And I can remember, I came on this building. Now I've got to be ADA compliant.
Yeah.
I've got to have a bubbler or a drinking fountain. And I can remember after I came here the second day, I heard the drinking fountain refrigerator go on to keep the water cool. I'm thinking, oh my God, that's costing me money. That electricity, and there's nobody here, can I? Maybe I put it on a timer so it's just cold when the employees are here. Anyway, Jerry was a big, and what ended up happening was that was my significant life step.
Okay.
For me, and I don't know, didn't know if we were going to get to this point, but it's part of the growth in the UP for me. I think it's great. That business plan was written so well that the bank that gave me the loan asked me to be on their board.
Wow.
Okay, so now I'm nobody working in Grandpa's grocery store. Nobody knows who I am.
Right.
I'm so busy working, I don't have time to belong to a Kiwanis or a Rotary, so I don't know those business people, and I don't feel like I belong yet.
Sure.
I feel like they're better business people than I was. I was just a little schmucky guy working on Saturdays and Sundays and all that stuff. And what's interesting is, for me, I'm going to use his name because the grandest successful business person was that I knew that went to my church and had the most wonderful family was a guy named Louis Pioli.
Okay.
And for the people in the UP, he was in partnership selling food with the Cohodes family. So we had a business in Ironwood called Cohodes Pioli.
Okay.
And Cohodes, Sam Cohodes was part of that world, that's part of Northern and everything like that. So,
Yeah.
So they were at a very high level, but Louis Pioli was the most gracious, wonderful, kind man, and he retired from that bank board.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember I took his place.
Oh, okay.
And the feeling that gave me to sit in Louis Pioli's chair and take his place, I would have never dreamed that. Just, it was so precious to me. It was just incredible. And this is the first time that is going public, but I think it's important for everybody to know that you maybe can do this here in the UP. And
yeah.
I mean, Louis, he's passed away now, and in fact, I told myself if I do say this, I'm gonna call up his family and let them listen to this, so they know that I how much their dad meant to me and how much I admired him. So
yeah, that's very.
So I got on that board, and then I ended up on Go-Gibbet Community College's board because of that, which I loved, and then. In 2012, I got a call from Governor Snyder and asked me to go on Michigan Tech's board, so I'm on Michigan Tech's board of trustees. And that all started from that business plan. Honest to God, it just started from me making that move, saying, okay,
taking a chance.
Probably shouldn't be Bob the boat cover maker.
Okay.
And so that's probably the big one in my life. I mean, that was the big, just all of a sudden my life just kind of not changed. It took another 10 years or 15 years for it to develop, but I'm a slow developer, and I'm still developing, just so you know. So.
Hey, that's okay. As my dad always says, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
He
exactly.
says
that to me all the time.
Well, thank your dad, because that's what I'm doing. And I'm still not at the 20-mile mark yet. So.
So I guess then at what point do you set down your canvas bag, your tool bag, and kind of transition out of being the guy behind the sewing machine? How did that take place? I mean, was it that move here, or where did that point come in your story?
The Foster and Smith caused me to. So in the late '80s, I gave up my sewing machine. Okay, but I still had my mechanic bag.
Okay,
and in somewhere 97, 98, 99, before I bought Stormy Kromer, I'm giving a tour to my banker, and he looks at me and says, "You know too much detail. You better start delegating." And that was the point when I started bringing in consultants to have another look at us. Mm-hmm. And we started, in fact, I just had my second session with a new coach. I'm in my 60s, and I've got an executive coach coaching me. So I started doing that, and it was just huge for the company and everything like that. So I gave up my tool bag like about 2001 or something like that, and we found people to do that now. And right now I'm the third string, though. I'm still there's something about sewing machines that makes them really interesting, because it's not only being Bubba the mechanic, and the guys that are mechanics in the world in the UP. Women are sewing there, and so investigating what happened with respect for them really works. So having the report and having them anxious to tell you exactly what happened so you can figure out what happened to the machine is it's part of the temperament. So the guys that work here have to be that way, kind, caring, understanding. So that's all part of it too.
So this is actually a perfect transition again, as you mentioned, 2001, because I mean, I know that's when you acquired Stormy Kromer. So walk me through how this all came together. Because, I mean, this is, again, a monumental... We've got plenty of time, so I've got as much time as you need.
No, I'm fine. I can talk. I love this, and, I'm assuming you and the audience is figuring out that I just kind of love this and really love it. So we were who we were. We'll figure out and do anything that will stay in the United States. And I'm just starting to figure out that this contract work really comes and goes. Mm-hmm. We only worked for Kolpin for 7 years. We only worked for Wigmam for 3 years. And then when that's gone, I got to figure out what to do with my help, right? With the workers.
Right.
So we're starting to, right now we're clear on that, where it is. And so lucky for me, this opportunity happened. Because when you think about it, I'll never get a phone call that Stormy Kromer's going away. Nobody. Foster and Smith went away when they sold to Petco and those kinds of things. So anyway, I'm in a coffee shop and I'm having coffee, and the owner of the local dealership comes in and says to me, I just called in an order for Kromer caps for the store, and they told me they quit making them. And he put his finger in my face and shook it and said, you better do something about it.
Wow.
And that's how it happened. I mean, that was it. Don't anybody ever think that Bob is a visionary. Bob will kind of works on getting luck, grabbing luck and when it happens to him. But
yeah.
And I smiled and said, get me the number. I'll buy the darn company. And that was it. I mean, I didn't know the mark at the time as well as I do now. And so that afternoon, my office is here. I was out on the factory floor doing something. I come back and there's a little slip of paper that says the Kromer Cap Company. That's who was making the Stormy Kromer hats. I didn't know anything about it. I wore a red hat.
Yeah.
I knew people around here wore it. I thought, boy, this would be cool, but this will never happen. But I'll pick up the phone and make a call. So I call Dick Grossman, who bought it from Stormy Kromer in 1964.
Yep.
And I said, I'm a sewing factory in Upper Peninsula, and you at all interested in trading places and letting me take over? Now, keep in mind that the Kromer Cap Company was still making Kromer welding caps.
Yeah, the welding caps that got like the polka dots and
the
stuff.
The polka dots and the American flag cut up or whatever, Americana, stuff like that. So, and that's where their business was going.
Sure. They
were in Milwaukee. Dick was a suit and tie guy. Didn't work in the outdoors. Would never be wearing a hat in an interview. So he said to me, these are the things I remember. It's probably not worth your time because the entire market is 80% of the entire market is a 20-mile radius around where you're sitting in Ironwood. So I naively go down there. I know it was. I can remember going down there and one of the lessons I learned when I was at Gogebic Community College from the attorney that worked there was he mentioned to me that, you're a very talkative man, and if you ever get in legal problems, you should never be the negotiator because you just talk too much.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going down there with this, with advice not to negotiate. And I'm thinking, I really like this business.
Right.
So I get to Dick's office. I'm back in the 1930s now. Okay, this is old-fashioned business, right?
Yeah.
And Dick wears a suit and tie, and he kept his office. He's not in the factory. The factory's 60 miles away.
Okay.
But at lunchtime, he goes to the Wisconsin Athletic Club and has a cocktail with his cronies every day. So that's part of the, it's the old-fashioned.
It's like it's like an episode of Mad Men.
Oh, it's so cool. And I can remember saying to this is how I started. I said, Dick, I came here. I'd really like to make this happen, but I got this friend back up north that's told me never to negotiate anything. And I said, the only way I know how to talk is, could we talk like we've been friends for 20 years? And I can remember him folding his hands on his chest and his shoulders going down and him relaxing and said, that would be really nice. So we just talked.
Okay.
And we became friends, and it was just really fun. So we came up with an agreement I can tell you guys the long story because it's kind of fun. It becomes more fun when you hear this. I'm a guy from the UP. I'm never going to tell you to trust me or that I'm a good person. I'm just never going to do that. I'm a reputable company. It's really hard for me to do that stuff.
Right.
I'd rather you work for me a year and then call me and say, this is really nice. I'm really glad I found you. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's my kind of way we've lived it. So now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, do I need the Kromer name? And my original agreement said I would never use the Kromer name.
Whoa.
Okay, that's how naive I was about the strength of the history and Stormy Kromer and all that fun stuff. Okay, so because I just didn't want to interfere with the Kromer Cap Company, which is still in business. So I bought the rights. Basically, I didn't really buy a company. I bought the rights to manufacture a product. He just discontinued making.
Sure.
So they put something on the shelf and I offered to pay him money for it. So think about it. But so, it was called the Kromer Blizzard Cap. So I've got some hats here that say the Jacquart Blizzard Cap.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah. So I didn't know the value. We're practicing making hats in Ironwood. People are coming to me, finding out that we're making hats here in Ironwood. And I had this wonderful old lady and saying, "Are Kromer caps really made in my hometown?" And I said, "Yeah." I smiled and said, "Yeah." And she says, "I'm so proud of you." And then I had Bobo Krisnarch, a neighborhood friend, fellow firefighter of my father's. We lived 5 doors away from my father. His kids were a little older than I am, but he was a neighborhood father. He came to me and said, "1947, I went to a dance. Everybody was wearing dark clothes because it was after the war. Nobody wore bright colors. They hadn't come back yet. Everybody's still mourning and all that stuff. I owned a black and a red Kromer cap, and I decided to wear a red Kromer cap. And I walked on the dance floor, and 4 of the most beautiful young ladies wanted to meet the guy who was daring enough to wear a bright color to a dance, and that's how I met my wife."
Wow.
And I'm thinking, I wonder if there's more to this than I really know.
Sure.
So keep in mind that I'm a B2B guy. I'm a business-to-business guy. When I go to Copen, I knew Ron Copen. I didn't have to deal with consumers. He did all the marketing, right?
Sure.
When like right now, we're making the canopies for Rainbow Play Systems.
Yep.
I didn't have to sell them. I have to go meet the people in Brookings, South Dakota, or now my youngest daughter goes there and meets with them. Mm-hmm. So we're a B2B, business-to-business company. I don't have consumer knowledge on how to do this other than from being a boat cover guy and upholstery. That was one-on-one with the customer.
Yeah.
I decided that maybe I should learn more, and I go back to Milwaukee with a picture of my grandfather wearing a hat, a picture of Stormy Kromer and his wife Ida, and a black hat. Because all I bought was the rights to make a black and red hat.
Okay.
And I interviewed marketing companies around the UP. Around Milwaukee. And I can remember Ken Hansen. I picked them. I can remember him looking at me and saying, "You don't have a clue what you've got here.
Right.
We can have so much fun with this nostalgic black and white history. You just have no idea." I says, well, by the way, I don't own the rights to using the Kromer name." He what? And I said, well, I just didn't want to argue with, I didn't want to possibly use that name and have him worry about me defacing the name of Kromer. I would have to tell him I'm a good guy, and I don't do that.
Right.
He says, "We're not working with you without the Kromer name. That is absolutely ridiculous."
Wow.
And he's just really upset. So I called Dick up, and the one thing I got going for me is Dick and the Kromer Cap Company and Jacquart Fabric Products share the same thread salesman.
Oh, okay.
And Mark, you know Gina, but
yes,
her younger sister, KJ, is a basketball nut, and so is Mark, the thread salesman. And they adore each other. I mean, when he walks in here, he just lights up like a Christmas tree. And he's known KJ since she was in high school. And I think she was only working here full-time a year. But he knew her through high school and in college, and they just loved each other. He loves my family. And I said, "Dick, I got this marketing company that wants me to use this Kromer name. I understand George's nickname was Stormy. That would work really good for a winter hat. Mm-hmm. So how about if I became Stormy Kromer? You stayed the Kromer Cap Company. And I know you don't know me at all, but we share the same thread salesman. Call up Mark and ask him if he would like to, if he give a reference to me and my family that would get you some comfort level." Yeah. So that's how. So then we added that paragraph to the contract, and I became Stormy Kromer. So then, a couple of things the marketing company did is I learned that everybody knows there's ear flaps on Stormy Kromer. That patent, which we have the original drawing for, that patent expired in 1942.
Yeah, I remember Gina telling me that.
Yeah, so then they're the ones that gave me the advice to trademark Stormy Kromer. So and a great way to explain this is any restaurant in the UP can make a hamburger. There is no patent on a hamburger.
Right.
But there's only a few restaurants in the UP that can make a McDonald's hamburger.
Sure.
Because they own the trademark of McDonald's, right? And so we trademarked Stormy Kromer. We can have this forever now. There's no life to a trademark.
Sure.
You renew it every 10 years. So we did this. And then the last kind of fun story that launched me before Gina came in and before you would hear some of that other story was they said, "I think the Milwaukee Journal would like to write an article about you." Now imagine being a little businessman in Ironwood, not not thinking you're anything special and everything like that. And going back down to Milwaukee a couple weeks later to be interviewed by the Milwaukee Journal. And this would have been certainly the first time that I've been interviewed by really anybody.
Sure.
And I'm not wanting to do there. And I'm really nervous and uncomfortable. I'm sitting in the conference room of the marketing company because that's where they set it up.
Sure.
Doris comes in, leans on the doorway. It's 5 after 1. She leans on the doorway and looks at me and said, "I've got 55 minutes. And it's like, whoa, she does not want to be here. My boss sent me to this stupid interview, and here I am, okay? And I remember saying to myself, "Bob, what are you doing here? This is ridiculous. This is going to be horrid." The interview's over. She's coming toward me to give me a hug and thank me. I look at her over her left ear. She's coming at me, and I look at her left ear, and there's a clock on the wall, and the clock says 20 to 4.
Whoa.
And she's got me in this embrace. She's a close talker, so she's, her nose is 3 inches away from my nose. She says, "This is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my editor to pay me to get up to Ironwood. I'm coming up to interview folks in the UP."
That's awesome.
So up she comes.
Yeah.
And we set her up. Everybody's got an old story with Stormy Kromer, right? Everybody's got a hunting camp story or something like that. Well, we brought in 2 older guys in their 70s and 80s. One was Otti Nirmala, who spoke broken Finn, just perfectly. And he was a construction worker. Single guy all his life, construction worker. One of those guys that drove road gravel trucks and stashed all his money. Rode a big, beautiful Cadillac and lived by himself, spoke broken Finnish. And he came with 2 hats, of course, his church hat and his work hat, right?
Perfect.
And told this story about, when your work hat falls the threads, then your church hat gets downgraded to your work hat, and you get a new church hat. And then Ted Erspalmer from Hurley, Wisconsin, he met Stormy Kromer. He was born in Antigo, Wisconsin, and his dad sold Stormy Kromer hats or Kromer caps.
Okay.
And sold this hat. And he remembers as a 10-year-old seeing Stormy Kromer with a suitcase of hats, selling them to his dad basically out of a trunk.
Yeah, because he was from Kaukauna, right?
Yeah, so he's from Kaukauna, but so Antigo would be an hour away or something, whatever the geography is.
Yeah.
And so Doris is now, and she takes pictures of the factory, and she's now leaving and giving me a hug again, thanking me. And she's this far away from my face again. She says, "You don't know this about me, but I'm the boring 4th-page business section writer Monday through Friday. Yeah. I never have pictures. I'm just writing statistics about business. I don't really know why they sent me here. But I've been the cover of the business section once before, and I can't imagine this isn't number 2.
Wow.
And she thanks me, and off she goes, okay?
Yeah.
So now time goes by, you forget about it. Of course, that's nothing vibrant in my life or anything like that. I was on a business trip in Detroit, and I'm flying on a Sunday from Detroit to the central Wisconsin airport near Wausau. I get off the plane on a Sunday. I go into the airport, come out of security, go into the airport, and there's a man carrying a newspaper upside down, and I can remember tilting my head upside down and saying, "Can I see that newspaper? I think that's me on the cover." And so here we are, just met each other.
Right.
We're looking at this paper together, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at the paper. And I says, "I can't believe it. I'm above the fold. I'm the story of the week in Wisconsin."
Wow.
And they wove 3 stories intermixed. The quirkiness of Stormy Kromer, which a lot of people know, and there's more to that story, and how quirky he was, and how the hat came to be. Mm-hmm. The need to keep jobs in America.
Yep.
And me saving the business from going out of business, right, sort of thing. So it was delightful. And then that story went to the Associated Press and hit 9 other cities the next day.
Wow.
Okay. And just to put it in perspective, what that did to, fresh off the pumpkin truck, Bob not knowing what he had here, right? I mean, I really didn't at the time. When I bought it from Dick, it was 98 years old. I said, "Dick, what's the record? I someday I want to break your yearly record of hats."
Yeah.
Okay. So he told me what that was. Is we keep it private.
Yeah.
It was back in '92. They sold the record hats, and then it just fell off for some reason and stuff like that. So I knew what the record was. That article, in 2 months, broke the record 3 times.
Wow.
In 2 months. So, and then all the stories just started coming. I mean,
Sure.
you just can't believe, Scott, you just can't believe what this has done. Over the years, there's been wedding announcements and births, and this week, I finally got the picture from the woman, but we got asked about a month ago online, would you take my deceased husband's hat apart and cut it down to fit me so I could wear my deceased husband's hat?
Wow.
And so Bob the craftsman came up here on a Sunday and went in the upholstery room and took a hat completely apart into pieces, pulled all the threads out. Denise ironed it at home, took it home and ironed it. They printed me a paper pattern so I could lay it on top of the pieces and cut out the little, because there's not much difference. And we put it back, and then the ladies, we just put it in the assembly line and told all the ladies this was a used hat, and put her husband's hat size next to her hat size inside, so it says 7 5/8 and
Very
6
cool.
7/8. But I didn't know any of that would happen, but luckily for me, it kind of came to itself.
Absolutely. We've mentioned Gina and KJ a couple times as we've been talking. What's that been like for you working with your daughters? Is that pretty fulfilling for you?
Well, very similar. Absolutely yes. Okay, but very similarly to me not wanting to work for my dad, I never mentioned it. We never ever had that discussion.
Sure.
And I just didn't realize the example that you give as a business person I was giving an example to my daughters to be business leaders as well.
Absolutely.
I didn't see that coming at all.
Yeah.
They watched, and when they were in high school, that's when we built this building and I got on the board, and I think both of them, I didn't see it coming. Both of them had aspirations to be community leaders as well, or try to be that.
Yeah.
And so KJ was the homebody. Gina will tell the world that she was ready to leave the UP when she was in 8th grade.
Yep.
She was, and imagine KJ. She's the sporty girl that we go to basketball games with, and we do lots of things like that. So we've got lots of time in the car together. And
Right.
stuff. But Gina was the girl that had wings and
Yes.
needed to fly, right?
Played how many instruments and sang and
Yeah, she sang, got a paid national anthem singer in Dallas, and working for a large nonprofit business, and rising the corporate ladder and all that fun stuff.
Right.
But what we didn't see was, we have a close affiliation with Wisconsin just by our geography here, right?
Yeah.
And so we rented a resort in Wisconsin in Mercer that was all we could afford. I didn't own a cabin or a cottage or anything like that. So I rented. Actually, I bartered my first week there. I upholstered 2 couches for a week's stay in the resort. And we went there for 19 years. Okay, we went there. The whole family went there for 19 years. 2 years before Gina came back, Denise gets a call from one of Gina's coworkers and says, we had a game in the office. If money was no object, what would you do for a living? And Gina wrote, I'd own a bait shop in Mercer, Wisconsin. And didn't realize that was coming. So then 2 years later, Gina came back, and actually she was asked to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow because she was Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz when she was in high school, and the Ironwood Theater celebrated its 60th or 70th birthday. And so Gina, Saturday night, I'm take off my glasses and prepare for her to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow while I'm tearing up, of course, and all that stuff. Sunday morning, so that Dave, her husband's in Dallas. We're at our summer home. I woke up there. Mom's still sleeping, so it's coffee with your daughter.
Right.
All the fathers can really get to this. Now imagine this is the daughter, and it's never coming home, and having morning coffee, looking out at the lake, and she says, Dad, you're not prepared for this, but I want to come home, work with you, and continue your legacy of employing people in Ironwood. So
very special.
Very, very special. We honor and respect each other to the nth degree. We hardly have any mishaps. Another thing that we are, you hear of the family business problems. Mm-hmm. We are tapped into a guy that writes books on it, on the dynamics of family business.
Okay.
And so we have a family business counselor that helps us understand
It's very interesting, yeah.
And there are dynamics in family businesses that are strong, and
Sure.
they come with the territory. And not on my watch, I mean, I can get really firm about this, but not on my watch will I be laying on my deathbed with one daughter not there because something happened at the business,
Right.
and we got in a stupid fight over it. So
Yeah.
we work really hard. We respect each other, and obviously we have a couple of bad days a year, but it's not much. And we've learned how to be really open with each other and care about each other and speak with love, but we've got to grow at the same time. So they both had to push themselves like I have.
Sure.
We can't stay the same. Stormy Kromer needs to keep growing.
Right.
And we can't stay the same, and we've got to keep tweaking ourselves and just kind of moving. And that's why I still have a coach.
Sure.
I'm trying to keep growing, and I'm just having a ball.
So would you say that challenge to keep growing is that what's keeping you going? I mean, you've been at this one way or another, either behind the sewing machine or sitting at a desk for almost 50 years now. I mean, what is it day in and day out that keeps the coals burning for you?
The interest is to keep growing, and success to me is that Stormy Kromer, it used to be just the business, but now it's Stormy Kromer is alive and well 50 years after I'm gone.
Sure.
I mean, I've got a
legacy.
Yeah, I just want it to stay here. I want it to be part of this community. Right now we're still in a growth period, and we aren't, financially as successful as we'd like to be.
Sure.
Right now, I'd like to be writing more checks in the community. I really wish I had more to give this community.
Sure.
But I don't. We give as much as we possibly can, but I'd love to. The thought of having, if I do now, it's great, but the thought of having an impact on the community, the UP,
Sure.
I mean, I think we've done a little bit of that, but I'd like to just keep making that greater. And so I work really hard at growing myself and also keeping myself healthy so that
Sure.
I can have good years left.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've hit like every check mark I hope to get out of this conversation. Is there anything that you feel like that I left out, or anything else you want to?
No, I think we did well. We're over an hour, but that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah. So my one final question to you is the same question that I ask everybody that sits down to talk with me, and you're probably thinking like, what is this question going to be? But how do you like your pasty?
How do I like my pasty?
Yeah.
Ketchup and chocolate milk.
It must be a family thing, because that's the same thing Gina said.
So I think I got her hooked. Sorry.
That couldn't be a more perfect answer, because that's the exact same thing that
that's
she
really
said.
cool. I've listened to your podcast, but I've never listened to the very end of one.
Yeah.
I've listened to the beginning just to get a feel for this. No, I'll have to listen to that, what the other comments were.
Oh, there's been some wide-ranging answers, so you'll definitely appreciate that. But Bob, again, this has been an honor to sit down and talk with you. I really appreciate
Great,
this.
Scott.
It's been great. So
Well,
thank you.
Thank you so much for asking me. It was an honor to be here, so thanks.
Okay, that's going to wrap things up here for this episode. I just want to give another huge thank you to Bob for taking the time to sit down with me. Obviously, he's a very busy man, and the fact that he gave me over an hour of his time and was so open and honest with me, I really appreciate it, and it was definitely special. I also want to give a huge shout out to his daughter Gina and really the whole crew over at Stormy Kromer. As I've gotten to know them the last couple of years, they've been nothing but kind and gracious and very accommodating and just really, really great to work with. So a huge shout out to everybody over at Stormy Kromer. As I always tell you at the end of these episodes, I really want to hear your feedback and your big takeaways from the episode. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can drop me a line at my email. It's chatteduppod@gmail.com. Or you can find Chatted Up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can write on my wall, slide into my DMs. However you want to reach out to me, don't hesitate to do that. And that goes for wherever you're listening into this podcast. Please feel free to subscribe, rate, and leave me a review. That's how this podcast grows, and that's how more people find out about it. For all of you loyal listeners, you know how I typically end my episode, and it feels especially appropriate given these difficult times that we're all in. So, as always, I'm your host, Shooter. reminding you to keep your chin up and your eyes forward.